Hey, my name's Bruce Snell. I'm with BSG International, and today we're going to be talking about our class number 25 and its base homework, Balancing Our Lives. And what we're going to do today, this is a part in part 6 of our series, The Final. And what we want to kind of reemphasize here, what we're doing is that, remember in the first 5 parts, what we did was lay around kind of, the first ones was to give us a little focus on the 4 barriers to quality and that awareness. The other ones we kind of started looking at shaping up the organization and its systems, and then we started working on developing those base work centers to start building that business infrastructure. Then we came in with some corrective action, both people and process. So what we're doing here now is kind of bringing the personal side to it to kind of try to tie it all together here. But when you go back, and hopefully you will be implementing these things, that you'll be able to step back and look at it and understand what's happening as you're trying to put some of these things into play. Mainly having to deal with the people, because the process issues aren't nothing. All that is just a matter of defining them. Okay, so if we'll look now at page number 1, and we look at the story there that we're beginning with is problems at home and work. This was one of the interesting things as I went to some of the larger companies that had a kind of a formal organizational, human resource department. And what they were saying is that we had kind of evolved to where I started hearing a lot of leave your problems at home and leave your problems at work and don't bring them back and forth and all that. And work is not a place to talk about it. The life lesson on this is be the first worker to step up and show compassion, concern, and respect for your fellow employee. What we're saying there is that as we look at getting people together at work, the majority of us don't really have anywhere to go other than home and at work, meaning that we don't belong to the country club, we're going to work, and most of our waking hours are spent at work. So what happened? Our opportunity to meet other people, our opportunity to expand, and what we call for our continuance and growth is really kind of narrow. So if we're having some issues at home, what we're saying is that as we're going to work, if we can't share and talk to the people at work to kind of let them, to kind of air it out, where are we going to do that at? And so the part of what was kind of disgusting to me is that they're saying, well, you don't bring that stuff. And what we were doing is that it was shutting down the employees. Then all of a sudden, that person that was having a problem at work had no one to talk to. And so we could kind of see them just kind of keep going, and it seemed to fester inside of them to where it's about ready to explode. So we kind of talked about that. Number one, if we don't talk about it at work, the majority of us have nowhere else to talk about or show or discuss our concerns. And we're saying that if that person is upset, having problems at home, how productive is that person? That thing of just ducking your head and say, hey, let them solve their own issues, y'all, that don't work. What we got to do is be that first one to step up and show concern. So if you're looking at being able to pull a light cord and turn off whether your problems, that doesn't work. And the person that is telling us, oh, I can separate at work, I can separate our home life, and I can do all that, I still haven't found someone that could do that, other than some of these folks that might have like a workaholic thing or something, is that they're doing that, but they've got a whole nother issue to work with. So this problem at home and work, it seems though today most of the spouses are working, both spouses are working. So it looks like the kids are all busy, everybody's out doing things, and it seems like we have very little time for one another. And so we get so caught up into day-to-day activity at work, and then by the time the weekend comes, it seems like we're now going out to soccer practice, softball practice, baseball, golfing, or whatever, and we're doing everything but having time for ourselves, not only as an individual, but as families. What we'd like for you to step back and think about is that we kind of went through this craze here about making sure our kids were involved and that they need to participate, and I agree with that totally. But the majority of the kids that I'm seeing now, that they're almost like they're getting up at 5:30 or 6:30 in the morning, and most of them aren't getting home until 5:30, 6 or 7 at night. Man, they've had a long day. You think of how you feel, of how our kids are feeling. Plus, when we put them into that cycle of the weekend and after school for sports or whatever else that they're belonging to, man, that kind of wears on them after a while. It kind of wears on the family. You know, it's okay for us to just kind of sit around and be with each other. It's okay for us not to belong to every social event known to man. I've actually had, my daughter had some friends that actually, I guess their parents bought them like a daytimer or something, and they were looking months ahead to see if when they could spend the night. And I said, well, I don't particularly want her spending the night over there. If they've already dealing with those issues, there's some problems in that household. So if you look at, we need to really step back and focus on what's important in life, and that's each other, that's our family, and in order to support our lifestyle, we have to have a job. So if you look at it, we need at work to be considerate of each other, and we also too need to encourage. We have a company out in California, and Mr. Boswell, it seems like all these entrepreneurs that I run into, they all kind of have something that they hang dear to. And one of them was, I said, Mr. Boswell, what do you come into work and try to do? He goes, you know, Bruce, the biggest thing I do is that, you know, I have the open door. And he goes, I've read your book about no open door policy and all that. He's got about 40 employees or 50. And he said that when somebody walks by the door, he goes, I know when they have a problem. And he goes, Bruce, if I think that I'm going to wait here and that person's going to come in and sit down and tell me they got an issue, it's not going to happen. He goes, I go out there and get them and bring them into the office. And he goes, I don't care if we have to spend 15 minutes, 20 minutes or whatever, I'm there to help them and listen and give them some support, because he's going, you know, we have a lot of working moms here, and in order, they're having to deal, and there's a lot of single moms out there, that they're having to deal with these issues at home that puts a lot of stress on them, and they're also having to deal with the ex and all this other stuff. So what Mr. Boswell does is really try to help his people out, and if they got a problem, so I'm not saying that we need to babysit everybody under the sun, but we also all need to be compassionate, and we also all need somebody to talk to every once in a while. So Mr. Boswell, in effect, had kind of figured out over all his years of experience that this was a good thing to do, and that's what he does for his employees. Also, too, Mr. Boswell has been growing probably anywhere from 10 to 15% annual, and been able to buy some companies that went bankrupt on a quarter on a dollar. But all his employees, even when the economy slowed down, and we had a tough one out there in California, is that he still kept his employees. And his employees that started with him 15, 30, well, it's been longer than that, probably 35 years ago, are still with him. And if you look at that, we talked earlier and throughout the show about all this negative stuff we hear. There's a ton of good companies out there doing it. Another one in particular is Quality Plastics out in Colorado. They're one of the top 25 manufacturers in the country. And what Kent Sampson says is that he wants to create a sanctuary for his employees. And we talked about this on the show, and I think it's appropriate here, is that their whole family, even their kids, all grew up in the business. The kids were telling us that they literally would sort the pellets and stuff for their injection molding machines and stuff. And it was kind of neat to hear how the whole family worked, and it was the business was a part of the family, and they've grown the business, and the people absolutely love working there. It's a beautiful facility. And I asked him about his turnover, and he goes, well, you know, Bruce, our goal is to have this sanctuary, and if somebody's got a problem, when they come here, we're going to do everything we can in our power to help them through this, to where they can get rid, whether we have to help talk to them, take time out with them, what we're going to do is try to help them through this. And that's why I was saying the other day is that basically I asked Kent, I go, well, what's y'all's turnover? And they said, well, we kind of had one about 3 years ago. They had, in the tightest labor market out there, they had one employee leave, and they said that they had worked with them and the person just couldn't fit into the organization. And we talked about, I love those seminars about retaining our employees. Our first question as we look at it from a quality system and value standpoint is, why in the world are these people leaving? If you look at it, money is number 4 statistically on the poll. Everything else is about job satisfaction, feeling that they're a part of the thing and they're challenged. This is what we're talking about, building these base work centers and giving these base skills that it keeps the folks involved in the organization and they can take control and improve their job as they see fit, because they know before anybody else what the market's doing, what the competition's doing. And we say that if you just listen to your employees, you'll hear your customers, because they already know what's happening out there. Let's look at page number 2, and it's Applied Business Science Leadership. After looking at all this stuff we've talked about over this ABS certificate program, we want to look at what are some of these things from a leadership position that we need to be doing or focusing on or looking at in regards to building all these structures, in regards to this personal awareness, in regards to positive attitudes, reinforcement, delegating down. I've kind of put together some things, bullet points, that what we're going to do is that we're going to cover them. And when you get back to work, you're going to be able to read these and you'll remember kind of about what we talked about here. If you look at this, the Applied Business Science Leadership, number one reason and number one thing we're in business for is to keep the doors open. And that is, we can be everything under the sun, but we still have to stay in business. So our focus is, what are the things that we have to do to stay in business? If you look at retain your employees as number 2. We spend so much money that we get a good employee, we bring them in, and all of a sudden they're doing good, we're giving them a little more work and their job grows and they grow up here a little bit, then all of a sudden it's like we slot them into a complacency type thing to where they're not a problem, they're not aggravating us or nothing. So what happens is we kind of ignore them. And then what happens is that as we start ignoring them, they become less like they feel a part of the organization, or the organization is growing this way. And what happens is they end up leaving. Your good employees will always be able to find another job. Now remember, we said you couldn't run that 1% out of there with a sharp stick. There ain't no way you can drive them out of there. So if you look at with the employees, let's focus on the employees that we have. There was a story we talked about the other day, that star that you seek is already in your employment. Believe me, other than something like an engineer job, basically about anything and the majority of everything in your organization, once it's defined by the base work center, almost anybody there can do it. And so we're looking at how in the world can we satisfy and keep our employees, because we still don't understand the cost or put a measurement on what that cost when that employee leaves, and the time it takes to hire another one, the time it takes to bring in somebody else, time to go through all the mistakes. So we're saying, let's look at the thing, let's retain our employees, let's keep them happy, but in order to do that, we got to keep them challenged, we got to keep them involved. And what a great way to do it is with the base skills, and also too building that business infrastructure with those base work centers. Because remember, who's the best person to tell us how to do the job? So as management, we really need to be focusing in there on retaining these employees that we have. And the sad thing is, when is it the most of the time that we see our boss? It's when it's a problem. we don't ever see them when there's not a problem. And so it can go months without seeing, and then all of a sudden they're coming over, and we get kind of gun shy, because last time we had a conversation, I got in trouble for something. So it doesn't take much, and it don't cost anything to walk over and say hey to somebody. And don't take your Daytimer, your Palm Pilot, or whatever it is with you. Just stop by and just say hey and spend some time with your people out there. And I'm curious, I'm gonna throw this out to you. How many of y'all have ever known anybody that left a company because they got patted on the back too much? Because they're going, man, if that person tells me they appreciate me anymore, I'm out of here. I can't stand it. All they do is tell me what a good employee I am. It doesn't cost nothing to give a good pat on the back, to be and make them feel a part of the organization. That's what we're doing. And a perfect example of this is Gordon Harbert at Harbert Lumber. The owner there is that he does nothing but focus on his customers and his employees. There's nothing else. He's built his team in there. He's got people that are experts at everything in that organization that are continually evolving those base work centers. And Gordon is focusing on what he does best. He's a very good personality person, and he's also knows the lumber business better than probably anybody else out there. And what this does is that it allows him to stay with his customers, it allows him to interact with his people. Because without either one, you're not in business. The most important asset of your organization is your people. And outside of that, the reason we're in business is with our customers. So tell me who you need to be spending your time with. Need to be spending them with your employees and your customers. And it says, seek and welcome competition. Now, kind of what goes around out there is that the best way for me to get my price is to buy all the competition up there. And I'm seeing it out there in a lot of different markets and a lot of different entities, buying up the competition in the area and consolidating the stuff and doing all that. Really, what I call that is that we're just buying sales. Basically, we're going in, buying that company, we're shutting it down, outsource it, and all we're doing is buying the sales and moving it over there. And whatever assets they have, we spin them off. And so now what has happened is that you're locking out competition. And what we're saying here, you should seek and welcome competition, because competition is going to make you stronger. If you look at this, I think a perfect example was the auto industry a gazillion years ago, when they kind of got complacent. Then all of a sudden we had that little problem with getting some gas, and then all of a sudden the big cars, and then we couldn't afford the gas, we couldn't get it, so the little car. So then all of a sudden we started, the majority of us were driving imports from Japan, by the way, which is where Dr. Deming, the founder really of quality, started, because American industry wouldn't listen to him here. So what happened is that the auto industry didn't have much competition. So really, and I hate to say this because I've got a license plates on my car, I buy USA. I'm very proud of what we do here in this country, is that if you look at it, there was really some shoddy stuff going on out there in the late 70s. And what we looked at, maybe it wasn't late 70, late 60, I don't know, I can't remember when it was. And if you look at that, is that what happened is that the product, because they had the market, had no competition, they really kind of got complacent. Man, I don't know, all of a sudden we brought in imports, and all of a sudden now competition, they're having now to really work to get your sale. I don't know if any of you out there have an imported car, but you hop into an American-made car now, they're some of the best in the world, and they are good cars, but that competition made them get better. And that's the same as like in athletics. If you're a pretty big boy on a team that you outweigh everybody by 50 pounds, you kind of get maybe a little lazy. Then you go to a school where everybody's your size. Now you got to work a little harder. You got to work a little harder, not only to just stay on the team, but you got to work a little harder to pull ahead of everybody else. And that keeps you focused in on basically improving. And this is what we're talking about, competition. You should welcome competition. Competition will expand the market for you, because as the competition expands and grows, so does your market. But what it does, if we're not in the business of improving process and defining how we're you know how we usually react to competition? We cut payroll, line item expense. We're doing everything but defining how we're doing business or improving it. And if you look at next, it says happy customers. What is the value of a happy customer? Where do you measure it at? Well, we can say we measure it on sales, that sales are going up, but maybe the fact that sales are going up just because we happen to have a niche in the market. Maybe it's a good location. Well, we're saying here it's hard to put a price tag or hard to find on a bottom line what satisfies or what is a happy customer. We're saying here, do whatever we can to make our customers happy. And what's the other interesting thing is that we spend so much time going out trying to get new customers, we don't even focus on the ones that we got. And so what happens, they kind of feel like, hey, no big deal. I used to see old Bruce there every other day. Now I don't even see him anymore. In fact, they don't even return my phone calls. So what happens is that customer will leave. We need to really focus in, and that's where I think one of the, like Gordon Harbert is a master at it. Man, it's very seldom that they lose a customer. He's right there with them, and that's where we need to be. There's no more important job. Mr. CEO, president, department head, owner, whatever, you got everybody in the organization you got to run the business. You got to get out there and see your people and your employees. And focus on today and prepare tomorrow. We have a tendency to either kind of that new day every day, and we're saying, let's focus on today. Where are we at right now? What are we going to do? And then what's going to be happening tomorrow? And we're not going to get too much further down into this, but the whole thing is, let's focus in on what we're doing. And this is where we're talking about these base work centers. Continuance of purpose. We're saying here is that we need to have a proactive product and service, meaning that whatever product or service we have right now, let's just say this is a product and this is a service, we're saying not to be complacent with that product or service. We need to be continually reinventing, improving, doing whatever we can to get this product above what's out there in the marketplace. Bring better value. If we can bring better value to our clients, our market's going to expand. So if you look at what we're saying here, we need to be proactive with our product and service. We need to be continually reinventing our product and service. We need to continually focus. That's what we have to move management. That's what we have to move the organization to do, is to look at how we're doing business and focus on how we can continually improve how we're doing business of our product and service. We're saying here that we need to really look at putting time, energy, and effort in research and these base skills. Why? Well, we want to continually stay and improve our product and service. But remember, there's so many out there, and our textbooks are full of them, at a company that had a particular widget and never took it further than what it was. And then once they started losing the market share, or someone else started combine this with something else that made it more valuable and at like 20% less, that person just faded out of the market. And remember, a lot of reasons of that has to do with the fear and all the other stuff, but a lot of it really focuses on the fact that we don't know or don't have the tools for what we say for that continuance and growth. So we need to look at those research and continually put money back in our products and service and continually make it better. Don't get complacent with currently how we're doing business. We really need to look at what is it that we're going to do here in order to continually improve our business. And we need to look at down here, it says manage, plan, schedule, and monitor. As an organization, as employees, as base work centers, we need to look at how can we manage, plan, schedule, and monitor not only how we're currently doing business, but where we need to go in this thing. And it says focus on the process and get results. We're talking about here is that we have so much time we spend out here looking at all this stuff. What we need to be focusing on as leadership in the organization is focusing on how we're doing business. We need to continually look at how we're doing business and providing and supporting our product and service out there. We need to be looking at new ways to do it, and the whole focus of management and leadership is to continually improve how we're doing business. How are you going to do it other than fixing and improving the way that you're doing business and in process? We're saying line item management ain't getting it. We're saying here we have to define how we're doing business first, because the majority of us don't have that infrastructure. By defining it, we improve it. And then once we have a system, now we can continuously improve it. So our energy and effort needs to go from the management thing, the hands-on thing, to where we're looking at how we're doing business and what are those things that we can do to continually improve our processes that either create or support our product and service. So if you look at it, that was the key of what we saw 11 years ago. And that was the fact that here we had an organization that we were going sideways, and all we were doing, well, before I got there, was that we were just cutting expenses. We basically weren't improving business. We were just cutting enough to meet payroll on the thing. And then what happened, we never got any better until we were forced to change, and that was we were almost out of business. So if you look at this, we have to continually, as management, as owners, look at the business, develop the base work centers. That's why the base skills are so important. Get these skills down to the people in your organization that can continually improve their base work center, and let them go with it. And that's what we're saying with the task teams, the team meetings, the process, the step, and all of that. They have all that. We have to give them the tools because they can stay on top of it. What you have to do is to give us a direction internally within the organization. And so we're saying focus on the process and get the results. You're not going to do it with line item management. We're looking at here improvement, not inspection. If we're still out there inspecting quality in, it ain't working, guys. Let me tell you, Dr. Deming, we can go back and look at his success. What we're saying here is that we have to improve our organization, our systems, and focus on that to get the results. Because again, the improvement doesn't come from inspection. And what we're saying there is that we got something coming down the pipe, whether it's customer service, whether it's a widget or whatever, and we're looking at, okay, let's inspect to make sure it's good. We're saying if we're having to pull it off the line and inspect it, that it's not a good process. We need to continually build quality into that process and continually work. We talked about that variance and that break even and that continuous improvement. We continually look at our process to get the variance down that'll in turn lower our cost. But see, by just cutting expenses, we have not improved anything at all on how we're doing business. Because it's a little more disciplined for us, short-term and long-term, to define how we're doing business. And I also believe up till now we ain't had a tool to do that, because I remember where we were at 11 or 12 years ago. Education and, oh, I'm sorry, I skipped a little further down there. So supplier relationships. Don't keep rewarding on the lowest bidder. We've got to get out there with a supplier, and we got to get a relationship with them and let that supplier become a customer. Get personal with that supplier. Let them understand what you're doing. And you need to understand what they can and can't do, because they might have something that they're already producing, selling to another company that would benefit your product. You need to develop a tight relationship with your suppliers to where y'all basically know what each other, and look at it as a long-term relationship. But don't go in there. I don't know where we've been cranking these boys out. All they do is get that widget costs $9. You give it to me for $8, you got the business. Where do you think that supplier is going to be when it gets tough? They ain't going to be in your camp. The other interesting thing is that you watch it. They'll do anything to get your business. They'll even take it at a loss. And you watch, and I've seen it on an average of 3 years, that we can sit there and outsource anything because most of it is so poorly defined that within a 3-year period, we're back above where we were at, and a greater cost of doing business if we'd have stayed doing it than before we outsourced it. But the other interesting thing we've done, we've lost control of a particular piece or of a base work center. So if you look at this, we need to really focus on those supplier relationships. Let them help us, and we need to help them. Continuous improvement of the 4 barriers to quality. I just want to say one other thing about the relationships in business. I've heard all this cutthroat stuff, but there's so many businesses out there that it's been kind of interesting to see that we're doing business with this company and they're going, hey, you know, that thing's a little cheaper over there. They go, well, you know, old Bruce was with me 20-something years ago when no one would give me a line of credit. And Bruce kind of helped me by funding that inventory when I didn't have the cash or the cash flow. These are the relationships that we're looking at that are long-term and that what we need to develop. But you go out there with this arrogant attitude that you're going to go out there and cut everybody, or now all of a sudden your organization ain't making the bucks. Now you go to your suppliers and start cutting them for your inefficiencies. Believe me, you're cutting your way to disaster long-term. And we've already had several industries, several major companies out there that no one thought for in the world that they would ever lose their market or their market share, and they did. Okay, we're looking at continuous improvement of the 4 barriers to quality. If you look at the 4 barriers to quality, we need to continuously look at and rework that. How are we going to do it? We have to get everybody in the organization involved in it. Education and retraining. This is what we're talking about with the base skills. And we're talking about education. Remember, we're talking about what are we going to train on or try. We need to train on how to do our job. Who's the best person to tell us how to do it? The person doing it. Who's probably the best person to train or retrain? The person doing the job. That's why it's so important with the base skills and the base work centers. So we break the whole organization up into training, and we make it a formalized training program. That's why we're talking about the training as one of the barriers, because it's usually an informal training process or inconsistent. Leadership that seeks, finds, and solves, and consistently, and that promotes consistency, truth, that promotes trust. We need leadership out there in the organization that's continually out there looking to see what they can do to improve the way that they're doing business. Not sitting out there and holding a stopwatch on somebody to make sure they're doing their job. We need to be looking at how can we improve our business. When I go there, other than getting maybe the morning started with our work orders or starting up the copier, we need to be spending a majority of our time looking at how are we going to improve the way that we're doing business. How are we going to, the only way we're going to do it is by defining and improving the systems. Look at the organization and bring the organization in as teamwork. This is why we're saying we had to define how we're doing business, to break up the departments, to break up the base work centers, and work together as a team. But it's hard to work together as a team when there's fear in there. That's why we're saying it has to be a part of the organization's culture to focus in on that 4 barriers to quality. That we're constantly thinking, if I have no fear, do people fear me? And to really think about, am I really getting that right answer that I'm asking for? Or I'm getting what they think that I want to hear. It looks at realistic goals and budgets. Folks, we've gotten out there to where we have cut and we have cut and we have cut, and it's almost insulting. What we're saying is that you've asked me to cut 20%, we made it. Next year, 10 more percent. Next year, 20. Who's ever telling you that in your organization? You need to get rid of that guy and just take that money from his salary and go ahead and put it in a party bank or something, or give it back to your employees, because anybody, all they're doing is telling you to cut. No one in there is telling you or showing you how to do it or show your organization. That's where we're talking about where we get into that line item management. We're just cutting expenses. And what we're saying is we need to be defining the processes and improving the processes in order to lower our cost of doing business. So we're looking at realistic goals. There's nothing more insulting to give your folks an unrealistic goal that they know is stupid, and you're giving them something because you're in a boardroom and it sounds good, or you're under pressure, that you're putting pressure all the way through the organization to meet something. And we're saying here, it's insulting, and our people just look at you and just shake their head and they're going, man, this is ridiculous. They're less motivated. You're going to have to pull them along because they're not going to follow you. And it says people and process awareness. With the base skills, being able to focus in on our people, what we're saying, these transferable skills to build our people for continuance and growth, to help them understand the cost of doing business, help them understand their job, learn the skills to improve their job, and the understanding of processes. Everything, there's not one of you out there that's watching that's not involved in process, that's not involved in systems, and I'm willing to bet the majority of every one of you, they're not defined. Or you have that generic job description that we talk about that's on line 24, and it says all other duties assigned, but it don't tell you how to do the job. Now let's look at building business infrastructure. We're talking here as we're going through these base skills, we're going through, sorting through these processes, that this is what we're saying is build the business infrastructure. And we discovered that many years ago, that how can we improve this out here if we don't have the structural internal, and how are we going to take on another company? How are we going to take on another client? How are we going to service that? How are we going to grow when we don't have the infrastructure? And that's where the base work center came in. The base meaning foundation of your work, the center of your work. Get everybody in the organization focusing in on their base work center to build that business infrastructure, because that's where the strength of the organization is going to come from, is building that structure. The ones that are still in business, been in business, continually to grow in business, they usually have the same people around them. They usually have, it might not be pretty processes, but they figured out their business and they're really in there focusing on how to continually do their job, and there's a whole nother level of excitement there. Let's look at the base values. Remember that no matter what you're doing, we have to adhere to the base values. And I tell you, I'm absolutely floored by going to some of these colleges, and they've actually looked at the base values and in astonishment, because they're not teaching this stuff in school. And so our kids are getting out without this, like if you're a good person, you're going to get trampled on. We've all been trampled on. Another interesting thing is we went through the publishing industry. They wanted us to edit out the base values because they're doing some line item management. They figured we could lose up to 30% of the market because our 2 rules would insult some people. If they got issues with those 2 rules, you need to run them out of your company because they've got other issues other than those 2 rules. Now let's look at here, page number 4, the funnel concept. We'll cover that and look at that kind of a little lightly here. We're looking at the funnel concept of, I'm not going to read the life lesson, it's a real long one, but if you look at it, The funnel concept is what we have historically found as the organization. We're saying the 1% affects 5% with this negative rap, negative characteristics. It's like a little cancer bug in there that's going around and getting everybody they can. Then it spreads to 5, then it spreads to 20%. As the organization moves through this, moving from an informal to a formal, what happens is that the funnel concept, the other 19%, when they know that they're going to be held accountable, the company is doing what they said they're going to do, they're going to jump on board. Because it's really interesting when we get out there and we talk about taking on, building the infrastructure, all of a sudden somebody that has never been democratic, all of a sudden gets democratic and tries to get the vote on it. And we were just asked this the other day, well, should we get our employees to sign off? I go, we've done it both ways. One is that if we go out there and if we've got some negative rap and that employee knows that it's going to bring some structure, they're going to do everything in the world to tear it down. What we need to do is make a decision. Are we going to run our company or going to have the company run us? And what we're saying is that any change is tough. Any change creates fear. But if you look at, in order to move it toward a continuance and growth, the person at the top has to make the decision. Yes, we like to get buy-in, but already going to tell you what's going to happen. There's going to be those guys that's going to pick up momentum, and all of a sudden we're not going to hold accountable some things we're not, then all of a sudden they want to get rid of it. Or if we get a hold of those negative people, and I'm asking for your support if you want to do this, believe me, that they're going to do everything in the world not to do it. Just for the fact is of the accountability, and they're able now to manipulate the informal organization. So now what happened, you're the owner of the company, and now you're trying to sell them to do something that's the best for your company. Remember, everything else that we've tried has not been very consistent, really had no structure to it, and without the base skills and without the people involved, it was, I think what we've learned here, it was already doomed from day one. Next, let's look at taking off the glove story. The taking off the glove story, we talk about here, the gloves of quality and change are worn by the hands of integrity and trust. Because if you have this internally within your organization, you're going to be able to change. You're going to be able to build that organization. I don't care, there's absolutely no substitute for integrity and trust. Because if you have integrity, you'll have trust. Not only trust of your employees, but also too, you're going to have trust of your customers, your suppliers, and people in the community. Don't get that black eye out there trying to save 9 cents. What we're saying is that you've got to really do and walk the walk and talk the talk. And when we're looking at it, we're saying that don't focus in on the problem, focus in on the solution. And don't worry about having to pin the blame or get somebody to own up to it. Let's just hit the issues and move on. Number 6 is, page number 6, sitting on the sidelines. It was down at the bottom, it says on the life lesson, sitting on the sidelines is comfortable if you're a spectator. However, building a quality organization is not a spectator sport. This sitting on the sideline is one of the things that we were talking about earlier on here, is that how in the organization we always have people that are pointing fingers and telling us what to do or what we should do. Or if we do something, they're the first ones to say, well, y'all shouldn't have done that. And if you look at it, they have never been involved in the organization. They've never put themselves in a position of accountability. But what they've done is that they have become deal killers. Because no matter what deal we sit on the table, they're going to step back and second guess it all day long and tell you every reason why it ain't. And let me tell you, that negative attitude will feed through the organization. And usually a lot of times, the 1% are champions at sitting on the sideline. Because the fact is that they're going to make and say anything directly or indirectly that's going to benefit them. But they're never going to put and step up to where there's some accountability or to contribute to the organization. They'll never do anything. So this sitting on the sideline here is that let's look at our people that are bringing the deals to the table. Because what happens is that if we get people bringing the deals to the table, and all of a sudden we got somebody there second guessing them or telling them that it's stupid, they'll stop bringing the deals to the table. There goes the creativity. There goes the continuous improvement. There goes looking at new ways of doing business, looking at new ways to market. That we've stopped looking at, and by stop looking, we've stopped growing, both internally and externally. If you look at that, it's interesting. There's some businesses out there right now, and one in particular, which I will not mention, they're in almost every city in the country, is that what is happening, they have got out of business of what they were originally in business for. And what's interesting is that all they're doing right now is that they're collecting monthly association or fees or dues. They have absolutely no concern for their customers or their clients. All they're doing is making sure that they're getting those dues in. And what's interesting, the people that started that organization and that business are no longer being represented by the organization that they're paying the money to. They're now become what we would call kind of a cheap lobbyist for a lot of these big companies. For the fact is, the special interest, the big organizations have realized that they're in a lot of these communities and they're contributing money. Well, they get them to support special interests that benefits them directly or indirectly. The other interesting thing that's happening is that they're trying to hold on to the existing client base. Just like a lot of other companies that are starting to slide are afraid they're going to slide. They get almost paranoid, and then they start holding on. They don't want nobody to look at their client base. They don't want nobody to come to them. They won't tell you nothing. They won't bring nothing to them. All they're doing is trying to hang on. Believe me, I have seen a ton of companies over a decade that when you start trying to hang on to what you got and start shutting down, you're going to lose that organization. And the reason is that when you do that, you just shut down every creative opportunity known to civilized man out there, and that all of a sudden now we become very reactive. And the reaction is that to hold that customer there, don't want to do anything that might jeopardize them. So we're going to sit on it until we lose it. And it'll be interesting a few years from now to look and see how that organization has evolved. Now let's look at, we also have given you some things, and you've seen these, and you're going to see them in our next class, is that we're going to give you some surveys again to look at and to focus on the 4 barriers to quality and some other stuff. Is that where you can go back in case you missed them in some other classes, go back and take this thing and do some audits and do some surveys and kind of see what your people are feeling right now in regards to the 4 barriers to quality. So if you look at page 7, it's the survey. And what we're looking at there is that we're asking you to look at it both from your boss and your department. And then we want you to look at it as the folks that we're working for, or the employer. What's interesting of what we've done, as we started collecting data on this thing, we always seen that example here is from 0 to 5, we're saying basically 5 is the best. So if you look at it down here on the chart, I will rate my department as a 3. I will rate everybody else as a 2, or I'll rate myself as a 4 and everybody else as a 3. I always get these things back to where they'll rate their department, their job, their boss better than what they're rating the company, that they're doing a better job. And you know, the interesting thing is that they really believe that. They really believe that they're doing the thing, and all these other departments or work centers are the ones that are holding them back. And what was interesting, as I went into all of them, everybody felt that way. And that's another thing that helped us flush up the 4 barriers to quality. Also on this survey, we put down there on the bottom, we kind of get some silly stuff every once in a while, but are you management? Please circle 1, yes or no or question. Because as we get into this, some kind of are managers, some kind of ain't. They're kind of given some responsibility, they're kind of not. So they're kind of like their base work center's not even close to being defined. And then what happens, the management will rate their overviews almost 1.5 points higher than their employees will. And why is that? Number one is that they sincerely believe that it's better probably than what it is, just like us in the other side of it, thinking that what we're doing as a frontline or non-management is better than the other organization or other departments. It's the same here, because we all believe and all want to do what's best and what's right. And in effect, if you look at it all throughout the organization, when it's informal, where each one of us are defeating each other. That's why we have to nail down these processes, these process steps and procedures. This is why we have to get those base skills to our employees. Now let's look at the quality issue rating, and we've had this a couple of times now. If you look at my base work center quality issue rating, we want you to take this back also to your particular department or your job, or just take it personally. Take it back and fill this thing out and be honest and look at it. Say, well, how do we rate? How do we, in communication, how do we feel about my department? How do we feel about, are we managing, planning, scheduling, and monitoring? But to really do it, and to do it honestly and sincerely without whipping the tar out of who's ever filling the thing out. I told you, it's what's real sad is that we go into a lot of companies and people are afraid to put their names on there. And a lot of it is well deserved. For the fact is, as we grow through the organization, basically we don't have much skills, and when we're an informal organization and we don't have systems to manage, it even makes it that much tougher. So if you look at, we're battling a lot of issues, but those issues are the 4 barriers to quality. Okay, now let's turn to the next thing, the corporate citizenship. This is just something that I think maybe if y'all would like to do would be kind of neat. Just kind of see how you stack up or how your employees feel about these particular issues here in regards to family-friendly economic security, investment in employees, partnership with employees, safe and secure workplace. This will give you some of an idea overall of how your employees feel about your organization. Now remember, when an economy is good, everybody is doing good and making money. So the tough thing gets is when the economy's not doing that well, the market's not doing that well. That's where the bad supplier, the bad manufacturer, the bad service company are going to be weeded out. Right now they're out there making it in spite of themselves. So again, what we have to do is build those processes, because if you look at it historical, our economy has gone like that. Even though we have the best economy overall in the world since we've been in business, overall, we're still looking at, we have the ups and downs. And some of us that we're so inefficient, even if we lose or stay even 5% or break even from last year's cash flow, we're still going to lose it. And that's what's going to shake out the bad customer or the bad supplier or your competition. Again, mainly the dishonest, the bad person, they're usually not in business long. If they are, they'll soon be out, so we don't need to focus on them. Okay, now I would like for you to look at our frequently asked questions and our thoughts. Look at what is the need for a balanced life. It's like everything we talked about, there has to be moderation in our lives. There has to be a balance between work and home. We can't have, I actually have had some that go, hey, man, I'm going to stay home with my family and I'm going to make sure that they're taken care of and I'm going to give the time and I'm going to do this. I go, man, that sounds great, but how in the world are you going to feed them? You got to get out there and get a job. Also, on the other hand, the company is their biggest thing in their life and they're sacrificing their family. What we're saying is that there has to be a balance. And what's interesting is, how many new cars do y'all need? How many bigger houses do you need? What I look back on now, there were all 5 of us kids, we grew up. I think the biggest house we ever had was 800 square feet, and the boys in one, girls in the other, and my mom and daddy. When we had company, everybody's out in the living room. So if you look at this, what do we need in order to survive, in order to be happy, in order to have a quality of life? Your quality of life starts right here. Has nothing to do with any of this other stuff. We really need to slow down and step back and think about it. So we have to have a balance. Does worry affect us? Yes, it does. Worry causes stress. It causes all kinds of things in your body. For a young man to grow old, for a man that had a strong heart, all of a sudden got a heart problem, stress is a killer because it's depleting your body of everything out there. And when we have the 4 barriers, and especially when it's negative in a particular department, that stuff does, because we're worrying about, are we going to be in business? What's going to happen tomorrow? Am I going to have a paycheck? I got a house thing, and all that other stuff. Describe the applied business science leadership. Here what we're saying is that the leadership in the organization needs to really look at developing those folks and those processes internally within the organization. Keep moving the organization forward. Are the 4 barriers to quality causing any problem, causing my problems? I guarantee you they are. There's not an organization out there. Even the ones we've done still have the 4 barriers, but it's never ending. We're continually working through to define and formalize our business because it's continually changing. How can we apply the 4 barriers to quality at home? It's really interesting because we started having people coming back about how it was applying, that they would take some of the skills and some of the stuff that they learned at work and started taking it home. Yes, they can apply. And what we're looking at is just take these 4 barriers and really look at how we can apply to what we're currently doing and manage, plan, schedule, and monitor and hold that accountable. What we'd like for you to do is to kind of think about again, we're pulling all this stuff together. We're now looking at kind of thinking about the process. We're looking at now kind of thinking about how to keep a good workplace, how to get people involved, how do we continually grow our organization, how do we give these skills or these base skills, these transferable skills, how do we bring our people in to make them feel like they belong. These are the issues that we're working on here, and in this particular workshop it's the people. So I'd like for you to think about what we did, and we'll see you at our next class, and thank you.